Imagine that you are in a meeting and realize that a colleague is presenting inconsistencies in history. Instead of reacting impulsively, you apply the Stoic principles. You look calmly, ask additional questions, and keep emotional control. This approach not only helps to identify the lie, but also maintains the professional and respectful environment. By applying these steps, you develop a more critical and less susceptible mind to manipulations, transforming the way you see human interactions. Have you ever been fooled in a conversation? That feeling that something is not right, but you can't identify exactly what? What if I tell you that there are 7 subtle signals that can help you detect lies before it's late? In this video, we will explore how Stoic philosophy, combined with practical insights about human behavior, can help you develop a keen perception and a more critical mind to identify dishonestifications in everyday life. Imagine being at a work meeting where a colleague insists that she had no time to complete a task, but something in his voice or body language seems out of place. Or think of a conversation with a friend who, telling a story, seems to add too much detail, as if trying to convince himself. These situations are more common than we imagine, and often the signs of lie are right before our eyes. We just don't know how to see them. Here you will learn to identify these signs in a practical way, using principles of Stoicism to maintain mental clarity and serenity necessary to observe without being carried out by emotions. At the end of this video, you will not only recognize behavioral patterns associated with lies, but it will also develop a more critical and observing mind, capable of making more conscious and less influenced decisions by manipulation. Ready to start this journey? Let's dive into the 7 subtle signs that Stoicism helps you see and transform the way you interact with the world around you. Before we dive into the 7 subtle signs of lying, it is important to understand how Stoicism can be a powerful tool to develop the necessary perception. Stoicism is a practical philosophy that emerged in ancient Greece and was popularized by thinkers such as Seneca, Epictetus, and Marco Aurelio. Its main goal is to teach us to live wisely, cultivating mental clarity, emotional control, and the ability to focus on what really matters. One of the pillars of Stoicism is the idea that not everything is under our control, but we can always control as we react to situations. This means that instead of being dominated by emotions such as anger, frustration, or distrust, we can choose to observe calmly and objectively. And it is exactly this ability that helps us detect lies, the ability to see beyond appearances without letting ourselves be carried out by feelings that can cloud our judgment. Imagine, for example, a situation in which Marco Aurelio, one of the great Stoic emperors, needed to deal with counselors who were not always honest. Instead of reacting with impulsiveness, he used reason and observation to discern the truth. This approach not only helped him make better decisions, but also to maintain serenity even in the midst of intrigue. In the modern context, Stoicism teaches us to observe people and situations with a quiet and focused mind. When someone is lying, there are often small signs that go unnoticed because we are distracted by our own emotions or prejudice. By applying Stoic principles, we can train our mind to capture these subtle details, such as changes in the tone of voice, rapid facial expressions, or inconsistencies in history. So before we leave for the 7 signals, remember, Stoicism is not about distrusting everyone or becoming cold and calculating. It is about developing a clear and serene mind, capable of seeing the truth without being carried away by unnecessary manipulations or emotions. With this base, we are ready to explore the signs they reveal when someone is not being totally honest. First sign, inconsistencies in history. One of the most common signs that someone may be lying is inconsistencies in history. When someone invents a lie, it often needs to create details at the moment, which can lead to contradictions or narrative changes over time. For example, Imagine that a co-worker says he could not deliver a report because he was overloaded with other tasks. Days later, when questioned again, he changes the justification, claiming that there was a technical problem with the computer. These small coherence flaws are valuable clues that something is not right. Stoicism teaches us to observe these inconsistencies clearly and serenity without being carried out by emotions such as frustration or distrust. Instead of reacting impulsively, we can adopt a calm posture and question objectively. You mentioned before you were overwhelmed, but now it talks about a technical problem. What really happened? This rational approach not only helps us identify lies, but also maintain control of the situation, avoiding unnecessary conflicts. Moreover, Stoicism reminds us of focusing on what is under our control, our own reaction and the search for truth. Instead of holding on to anger or disappointment, we can use these inconsistencies as opportunities to practice attentive observation and assertive communication. In this way, we develop a more critical mind and less susceptible to manipulations. Second sign, tense body language. Body language is one of the most revealing forms of detecting lies, as our body often speaks what words try to hide. When someone is lying, they can show signs of tension, such as crossed arms, lack of eye contact, repetitive movements, such as moving hands or hair, or rigid posture. These gestures may indicate discomfort or nervousness, especially when the person is trying to hide something. For example, imagine that you are in a meeting and a colleague avoids looking in the eye while explaining why you have not met a deadline. He may be saying he did his best, but tense body language suggests that there is more in history. Stoicism helps us observe these signs without hasty judgments. Instead of taking immediately that the person is lying, we can use mental clarity to analyze the context and ask questions that help clarify the situation. In addition, Stoicism teaches us to keep calm in the face of these signs. Instead of reacting with distrust or irritation, we can adopt a serene posture and watch carefully. This not only helps us identify possible lies, but also to maintain emotional control, avoiding unnecessary conflicts. Body language is a powerful tool, and combined with Stoic observation can reveal a lot about a person's real intentions. Third sign, excessive detail. When someone is lying, it often tries to cover up the lack of truth with an excess of unnecessary detail. This is because the person believes that by providing a lot of information, it will seem more convincing. However, this behavior may be a clear sign that something is not right. For example, imagine that a friend arrives late in a date and, instead of simply apologizing, begins to tell a long and detailed story about traffic, the broken traffic light, the dog that crossed the street, and so on. This excess information may be an indicative that he is trying to disguise the truth. Stoicism helps us deal with this situation in a balanced way. Instead of being carried away by frustration or distrust, we can use mental clarity to identify what is relevant and what is just ornament. Instead of questioning aggressively, we can ask direct questions and see if the person continues to add irrelevant details. This allows us to maintain conversation control and avoid being manipulated by elaborate stories. Moreover, Stoicism teaches us to focus on what is under our control, our own reaction and the pursuit of truth. Instead of holding on to anger or disappointment, we can use these moments as opportunities to practice attentive observation and assertive communication. In this way, we develop a more critical mind and less susceptible to manipulations. Fourth sign, inconsistent voice. The tone of voice is one of the most subtle but powerful indicators to detect lies. When someone is being dishonest, they can have sudden changes in tone, such as a trembling voice, a lower volume, or even an exaggerated intonation, as if trying to convince himself. For example, imagine that a co-worker is explaining why he has not completed a task, and suddenly his voice gets sharper or he begins to speak faster. These variations can be signs that he is trying to hide something. Stoicism helps us deal with this situation in a balanced way. Instead of reacting with distrust or irritation, we can use mental clarity to observe these changes without hasty judgments. Instead of confronting the person aggressively, we can ask questions calmly and see if the tone of voice remains inconsistent. This allows us to maintain conversation control and avoid being manipulated by the emotions of others. Moreover, Stoicism teaches us to focus on what is under our control, our own reaction, and the pursuit of truth. Instead of holding on to anger or disappointment, we can use these moments as opportunities to practice attentive observation and assertive communication. In this way, we develop a more critical mind and less susceptible to manipulations. Fifth sign: avoid direct questions. One of the most revealing signs that someone may be lying is to avoid direct questions. When someone does not want to answer a specific question, it often tries to divert the subject, change conversation, or give vague answers. For example, imagine that you ask a colleague if he finished an important report, and he responds with something like, "Oh, you know how it is. The week was very busy." Instead of answering directly, it avoids the question, which can be a sign that it is hiding something. Stoicism helps us deal with this situation in a balanced way. Instead of reacting with frustration or distrust, we can use mental clarity to observe this behavior without hasty judgments. Instead of confronting the person aggressively, we can calmly insist on the original question, noting if they continue to avoid answering. This allows us to maintain conversation control and avoid being manipulated by evasive answers. Moreover, Stoicism teaches us to focus on what is under our control, our own reaction, and the pursuit of truth. Instead of holding on to anger or disappointment, we can use these moments as opportunities to practice attentive observation and assertive communication. In this way, we develop a more critical mind and less susceptible to manipulations. Sixth signal: facial microexpressions. Facial microexpressions are extremely subtle but powerful clues to detect lies. They are quick and involuntary facial expressions that last second fractions, but reveal genuine emotions that one is trying to hide. For example, someone may be smiling while telling a story, but for a short moment a micro-expression of fear or anger appears on his face. These small details may be indicative that the person is not being totally honest. Stoicism helps us deal with this situation in a balanced way. Instead of reacting with distrust or irritation, we can use mental clarity to observe these micro-expressions without hasty judgments. Instead of confronting the person aggressively, we can ask questions calmly and note whether these expressions continue to appear. This allows us to maintain conversation control and avoid being manipulated by the emotions of others. Moreover, Stoicism teaches us to focus on what is under our control, our own reaction and the pursuit of truth. Instead of holding on to anger or disappointment, we can use these moments as opportunities to practice attentive observation and assertive communication. In this way, we develop a more critical mind and less susceptible to manipulations. Sign 7. Excessive justifications. The last signal we will explore is that of excessive justifications. When someone is lying, he often tries to justify his actions or words too much, as if trying to convince himself and others of the veracity of history. For example, imagine that a friend arrives late in a date, and instead of simply apologizing, she starts listing a series of detailed reasons. Traffic, broken traffic light, the dog who crossed the street, the phone that touched halfway. This excess of justifications can be a sign that he is trying to disguise the truth. Stoicism helps us deal with this situation in a balanced way. Instead of reacting with frustration or distrust, we can use mental clarity to observe these justifications without hasty judgments. Instead of confronting the person aggressively, We can ask questions calmly and see if they continue to add irrelevant motives. This allows us to maintain conversation control and avoid being manipulated by elaborate stories. Moreover, Stoicism teaches us to focus on what is under our control, our own reaction, and the pursuit of truth. Instead of holding on to anger or disappointment, we can use these moments as opportunities to practice attentive observation and assertive communication. In this way, we develop a more critical mind and less susceptible to manipulations. Now that we know the 7 subtle signs of lying, it's time to understand how to apply the principles of Stoicism to effectively identify these signs. Stoicism is not just a theoretical philosophy. It is a practice that helps us develop mental clarity, emotional control, and a more observant mind. Let's explore 3 practical steps to apply these principles in everyday life. Step 1. Cultivate mental clarity. Mental clarity is critical to detecting lies. When we are emotionally shaken or distracted, it is harder to see subtle signs. Stoicism teaches us to practice meditation and daily reflection to develop a more focused and quiet mind. For example, set aside a few minutes a day to reflect on your interactions and see if there was something that caught your eye. This practice helps to sharpen your perception and identify behavioral patterns. Step 2. Observe without judging. One of the pillars of Stoicism is observation without judgment. When we detect a sign of a lie, it is tempting to react with anger or distrust, but it can cloud our judgment. Instead, Stoicism teaches us to observe calmly and objectively. For example, if you realize that someone is avoiding direct questions, instead of confronting them immediately, ask additional questions to better understand the situation. This allows you to collect more information before drawing up. Step 3. Keep emotional control. Emotional control is essential for dealing with lies and manipulations. Stoicism teaches us to focus on what is under our control, our own reaction. When someone tries to deceive us, instead of reacting with frustration or irritation, we can keep serenity and use the situation as an opportunity to practice the wisdom. For example, if a co-worker is giving excessive justifications instead of annoying, you can use mental clarity to calmly question and seek the truth. We have reached the end of this video, but the real work begins now, to apply what we learned in everyday life. We have seen that the 7 subtle signs of lies, inconsistencies in history, tense body language, excessive detail, inconsistent tone of voice, avoiding direct questions, facial microexpressions and excessive justifications can be identified with the help of the principles of Stoicism. By developing mental clarity, observing without judgment, and maintaining emotional control, you become more able to see beyond appearances and avoid manipulation. But remember, the goal is not to become suspicious or paranoid, but to develop a more critical and observing mind, capable of making more conscious and less influenced decisions by emotions or manipulations. Stoicism teaches us to seek the truth with serenity and wisdom, without losing empathy or humanity. Now it's your turn to put these concepts into practice. Start by observing the interactions around you more carefully, but without hasty judgments. Practice Stoic meditation and daily reflection to cultivate mental clarity, and whenever you identify a sign of a lie, remember to keep calm and act wisely. If you like this video and want to deepen further in Stoicism and personal development, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so as not to lose the next content. Leave in the comments how you intend to apply these principles in your life, or share some experience in which you have detected a lie using these signs. And finally, remember this quote from Marco Aurelio: "The mind that is prepared and quiet is not disturbed by the difficulties." Until the next video, where we will explore how to make difficult decisions with Stoic wisdom. Don't miss it.